Thanks for that presentation, Grant. And many of the themes that Grant has highlighted on really do speak to our next panel discussion, where we're going to evaluate how best it is that we can prioritize the art of employee engagement. Many of you have said that we've been tired. It's been a tough 2 years. We're struggling to get the funding that we require, as we heard from our previous speakers in the panels yesterday. The vision is not aligned. Sometimes we're at loggerheads in terms of reaching and understanding. So what is it that we need to learn as players within the NPO space, business itself, and of course making sure that there's a great sense of cohesiveness in driving the art of employee engagement in the institutions we lead. We're going to have a panel discussion, quick fire conversation for the next 30 minutes with 3 of my guests, one of them joining us virtually, and of course going to engage. If there are any questions, to ensure that we're able to get to you quite promptly, please do type them out on the chat service if you are joining us on the virtual platform. And in the room, we will do a quick check for you just to make sure that the microphone can get to you quickly and on time. But in the meantime, please do allow me to welcome my 3 speakers who will be joining me, two on stage and 1 virtually. Kathy Duff, who's the director at Trialogue. Khawapalelwa Motwagai, who's the Vice President of Social Investments at SASOM, and virtually from India, we'll be joined by Rohan Sama, who's an Associate Director and Head of Research, Knowledge Management and Strategy at Samhita Social Ventures. Please give them a warm round of applause that is welcoming, that is safe, and that encourages employee engagement. Thank you so much for joining us. Fantastic. I am fully intrigued by this conversation, and I think real big lessons that we're going to have to implement and unpack here. Joined by Rohan as well, who's joining us virtually. But I guess, Kathy, to provide us with context and the opening remarks that you can share with us regarding this particular theme of driving employee engagement. As we've heard from Grant, a lot has happened in the last 2 years. It's evident as well in the findings and the outcomes in the Trialogue handbook that we've received this morning. Help us unpack what we are witnessing in terms of the themes of employee engagement, and primarily, I guess, setting it on the backdrop of COVID, lockdown, and the stresses that we've experienced as employees.
Thanks, Gugu. Yes, so employee engagement really speaks to the commitment and connection of employees with their organizations. And obviously, engaged employees are higher performing and more productive, and research has shown that there's obviously benefits to that. And I think the issue is, as you've just mentioned, over the last 2 years, this engagement has eroded quite significantly with the pandemic, with the levels of anxiety. And I know Grant was talking to this ongoing trauma, but I think it's only been exacerbated through the last 2 years. And research shows that levels of anxiety have really increased. Mental well-being's been impacted. And people are also, as you mentioned, maybe some of the introverts,
right?
As Grant was saying, maybe some of the introverts have loved it, but not having personal interaction has also really played a big role in eroding employee engagement. So, I guess the question is really, how do companies build that engagement? And I'm not going to dwell on the HR aspects of that because we're not those experts, but there really are a number of drivers. And I think Grant spoke to the one, which is the culture of the organization. And he was speaking to trauma-informed culture, but also people understanding and buying into the vision, trusting the leadership, and understanding how they fit into the strategy of the organization. Then there's what's shown to probably be the biggest driver of employee engagement is actually the managerial factors, and it's employees' relationships with their direct managers. And then clearly HR practices have a big role to play.
Sure.
And the one where we have done research is around engaging employees through volunteering. And this also took a hit during COVID. So most large companies, and our research shows that over 70% of large companies actually do have employee volunteering programs, but many of those shut down during COVID. About a quarter of companies did introduce new online programs, and some of them shifted their existing volunteering programs to virtual volunteering. So there was still a level of engagement. I guess the positive findings that we had last year, for the first time, we didn't just interview or survey companies and nonprofits, but we also surveyed, in partnership with For Good, employees themselves. And although we found that many of them hadn't volunteered in 2020, we found that 9 out of 10 of them will be volunteering again in the future.
Wow.
And we also found that the volunteering really resulted in these employees having a positive perception of their companies. So again, it was about 90% of employees that said they would recommend their company and the product and the services, and that the volunteering initiatives of their company made them proud to work there. So I think there's some positive findings that came out of it, and even though on the volunteering side, we did see a setback, I think people are expecting to engage again, and we can hopefully expect some positive outcomes again.
It almost sounds as though we went from that fright or flight example to then seeking new ways as to saying, hold on, now that we are slightly more familiar with this environment of uncertainty, this is now enabling us to actually consider coming back and sharing a positive message. Kgawa, you work for an organization that is one of the largest employers in South Africa. Various clients and, of course, various communities that you also happen to impact. I'm keen to understand that as a representative of the Sasol CSI team, how is it that you have, I guess, engaged, participated, and seen the evolution of the employee engagement strategy that had to be implemented? Bearing in mind that you've got staff who are stressed out, working in local communities themselves that are overworked, and a CSI team as well who had to show up, right?
No, that's very true. Thanks, Gugu. And I think for us, one of the key things, and everybody knows Sasol went through a pretty difficult time over the last 2 or 3 years. And over and above that, that was compounded by COVID. So you can imagine the amount of pressure that employees are under. And I think one of the things that I can say is that our employee engagement is premised on our values. We took the time over the last couple of years to redefine our values, to redefine our culture as a business, and to redefine what our purpose is as an organization. How do we want to show up, not only for our employees, but for our communities, for our stakeholders, our shareholders, for government, for everybody? How do we want to show up as Sasol? And I think redefining that with employees actually helped to lift them morale through what was a very difficult time for us. And bearing that in mind, one of the things that we've done is that as part of those values, we made them into doing words. So we say, be safe, be caring, be resilient, be accountable, be inclusive. So it's an action, it's the way that we live every single day. Whether I show up to a meeting, am I being safe? Am I being caring? And do I listen to my employees? Am I being inclusive? So no opinion, not how anybody is feeling. Online meetings weren't new for us, but for the first time, we found ourselves actually having to ask, are you okay? Put on your camera, let's see. Are you okay? Are you doing well? As you know, a lot of people were staying at home alone. And we took the time to try to understand and to listen. And this isn't a new thing for Sasol. We've always tried to listen to our employees, and the tone is set at the top, right from our CEO through to our various executive vice presidents, down to the lowest level, to ensure that we engage and we cascade messaging down to our employees. And we do that through multiple platforms, just to ensure that our employees are consistently engaged with our strategy. So looking at all of that, that's how we've kept our employees engaged through the last 2 years, but also engaged with their communities. We've had a lot of disasters over the last couple of, COVID was the biggest one, but we also had floods. We had things that were happening in Mozambique in terms of floods there as well, floods or hurricane in Houston. We've had a number of things happen, but through that whole process, we made sure that we made our employees feel included in being part of the solution. So you don't always have to volunteer in time and being there physically, because as you remember, I said one of our values is being safe.
Exactly.
So first and foremost, we put the safety of our employees first. And yes, the number of hours of volunteering did decline. But what we did find is that employees started to get involved where they were. So now suddenly people were setting up their own NPOs where they were looking to help out. You had people who were joining other colleagues' NPOs where a colleague says, listen, I'm going to be doing a soup kitchen here, whatever it is, and they would piggyback on that. So even though there was a reduction in company-led initiatives, what we found is that people started to get involved more in terms of their own personal initiatives, if I can call it that,
Gotcha.
and utilize the 40 hours that we give to employees on an annual basis, but also utilizing the matched giving that we also give to employees. So every rent that you give, we give half of that back. So we match whatever it is that you give out there.
I want us to come back to that in just a moment. Not only the consistent engagement, but also the matching, which also works as an incentive to encourage people to give. But I do want to come to Rohan, who's joining us from India. And Rohan, warm South African welcome. For many who are familiar with the culture and, of course, the environment in India, we're well aware that there's similarities between our economies as an emerging market. I'm hoping that you can provide some insight as to what you've witnessed regarding particular insights of the employee engagement in an environment like India, which is highly populated, fully competitive, and faces similar challenges from an economic and socio-economic perspective like South Africa. Any key learnings that have come out from there?
Right. So at the very outset, very, very warm greetings from India to all of you. Thank you very much for having us here. I'll just build on some of the points I think that Gugu and Kathy has spoken about. We've been talking of uncertainty. And I think the context of this discussion should be by talking about us today, irrespective of being in South Africa or India or any part of the world. We live in a VUCA world, VUCA, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. But largely, V is for volatile, U is for uncertain, C is for complex, and A is for ambiguous. So having said that, and I think this is very important to understand that how this particular climate is changing the way business engages with society. How does business realign its purpose? And I'll talk about purpose shortly. That's one. Second, I think we spoke about strategy. And that's what I think that in India, at least, employee engagement is very, very integrally linked to strategy. And to talk about that, the panel discussion is titled The Art of Employee Engagement. I think we need to go beyond the art of employee engagement and start also talking about the science of employee engagement. While we do give importance that employee engagement is an art because it involves the manager or the leader demonstrating creativity. In fact, you have these employee volunteering programs which are designed, which unfortunately, are very ad hoc. Right? I mean, it's just like somebody wants to do some good. Let's just get some NGO and let's just get them. So when I talk about the science of employee engagement, I try to pitch for a case, and I'm sure many companies are already doing that, where you have a more systematic mapping of your employee volunteers' interests and aspirations. Because only then will you ensure that your employee engagement is sustainable. Right? I'll give you a real example. I know somebody who actually failed in mathematics in his board exam, and he just went out to volunteer because he wanted to do something good. Now, when he went to the community, this person comes from a engineering background, and he did not have the nuanced understanding of the community. Like this community was a community which was a marginalized community. It was a minority community. So therefore, there was no training given to him as part of the employee engagement program. Having said that, when he went there, he was there for 1 week. The next week, and of course, the children, he was doing a training on teaching children maths. So my first observation was that had he done a mapping of his own competencies in doing maths? So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that the science of employee engagement is important. Coming back to volunteering, and I think Kathy has rightly said that there are research studies available. In fact, Gallup in the US does fantastic research over several decades now on how employee engagement leads to increased business performance. It leads to increased profitability, productivity, customer loyalty, and so on and so forth. But I think volunteering needs to be integrated within organizational cultures. And that is where I want to locate. And I'm so thankful that we are having this topic because it is closely linked to this whole, what is the objective of the business and what is the needs of the community? And that's where I think that alignment is very important. And that's why I think the fact that we said the word strategy is important. How I would like to break up employee engagement is as follows. So for me, the word employee engagement, and I just made this up right now, is MPLOY, engage, and NENT. And I'll explain what I'm going to say. So the M stands for management, right? And this is in line with the argument that I make that we need to talk about employee engagement or design of such programs in a very systematic, structured mapping. In fact, there are also engagement matrices, by the way, which are widely available to you, right?
Got you.
So therefore, there is a movement towards a more systematic and science of employee engagement. So the M stands for management. Ploy as in strategy. We all know ploy means strategy, right? So management strategy. E stands for effectiveness and efficiency. Because at the end of the day, your companies are wanting employees to be engaged in social initiatives so that they can exemplify your organization's values. They can enhance their professional and leadership skills, right? So, and the engaged part of it, and I think that is what is running for me as a social scientist. The engagement I feel is lacking, and that is where COVID has really exacerbated that problem. It's all good to have an online way of teaching kids, but I think more from the employee perspective, the learnings when you go to a community, when you go to a marginalized community, the whole dimensions of power differentiates, and
Yes.
how do you deal with it? Because obviously a corporate or a business is on a higher pedestal, right? You always are judging the community. They don't know much. What do they know? We are here to teach them. So therefore, for me, learning is also very important, and that is something where I think, and in India, to just talk about Kathy, I think uh, uh, she spoke about how many of them were shut down, and there was a change to online volunteering. I think in India, in the public sector, especially, which is the state-owned or Indian government-owned public sector companies, they have really risen to the occasion, and today they have very, very elaborate employee volunteering programs. Some of them have employee clubs. As Google was saying, some of them have also started their own non-profit. Right?
Got you.
So as far as
Rohan,
India is concerned, they have done, I think I was doing a review of the various, and unfortunately we don't have time, but I did a case study of about 50 odd companies, profiling them. I think private sector and public sector have really risen to the occasion. But
yeah.
when I talk about engage, for me, the quality of engagement is something that is most important. That how is that employee volunteering experience really changing the corporate mindset, right? How is it talking about issues of vulnerability? I mean, is that person going to the field, is he or she getting transformed? Does this person become a little more sensitive to the intersections of caste, class, gender, race,
Got you.
etc.? If that
Rohan,
is
I'm
not
going to ask you
happening,
to
it's
pause it
just
there
like the
because you've
same old
actually
topic.
mentioned a very valid point that I think that we can build up on. And Khawa Palelo has got potentially a great case study that we can evaluate, right? Rohan has given us such a great breakdown and analysis there of employee engagement, right? Management, of course, operations and structure, strategy, effectiveness, but he highlighted something so critical, which is engagement. And I'm keen to understand from your perspective, Hawa, as to how it is as an entity like Cecil, perhaps, that you have lessons and learnings that you can share with us here today as to how best you can encourage that engagement, especially looking at the employees who are further down the landscape, speaking to management directly. Any lessons from the pandemic you can share?
Yeah, I think as I said, one of the key things was that we had to quickly relook at how we communicate with our employees, but also how we listen to our employees. So creating platforms and opportunities to be able to listen. So we started, for instance, with what we call CEO webcasts. So these would happen once every month. They were very frequent, especially during our turbulent period, to ensure that we keep employees engaged throughout that whole time. They were frequent as we were redefining our purpose and our values, so that employees felt that they were part of the creation, and that they can own the culture that we were creating. And to arrive at what now has become our revitalized purpose, which effectively becomes the roadmap in terms of what it is that we want to achieve as Sasol. I think for me that was extremely key. So listening through various platforms, surveys, we ran a lot of surveys. We did a lot of asking. We cascaded messages down through managers, for managers to surface what their employees are saying, right down to the smallest team possible, if you can think about it in operations, for instance, at a mining level. So bringing those messages up, what do they think and how do they define their own spirit in terms of how they show up, again, as I said, not only at work, but in our communities and with our stakeholders, and being a brand ambassador for Sasol. And
I want to quickly jump in there and potentially challenge you and hear from you too, Kathy, with a question is creating that psychological safety, right? Because Grant mentioned, of course, depending on your hierarchy, your background, just your physical appearance, that can already have an employee feeling disconnected and feel as though they're not worthy or validated enough to actually engage and participate. What has Sasol done, or are there teachings that you can share as to creating that environment for psychological safety to say, I'm young, I'm black, I'm female, but I can happily engage with anyone else regarding whatever trauma that they have? Typical, bad example, maybe. Grant, help me out here. But essentially the psychological safety to encourage employees to feel validated enough to participate and engage. And Kathy, you can feel free to add on this one.
So one of the things that we do almost once every couple of years is that we run a heartbeat survey. We try to run it every year, and it will be coming up relatively soon.
What do you evaluate?
So
Heartbeat,
we
some of us are thinking.
evaluate the heart, the mind, as well as the culture and the leadership style that you are experiencing as an employee. And it actually counts as part of what we measure and part of our KPIs as leaders within Sasol. And part of the heartbeat survey, one of the key things that came up about 2 or 3 years ago was a fear of speaking up, that our employees had a fear of speaking up. And hence, one of the things that we've put into, and I keep going back to the values because I think they're so exciting. And I think for the first time ever in Sasol's history, I think we have more or less the majority of the workforce aligned behind rebuilding our reputation as an organization and being part of the journey towards profitability at Sasol. So one of those things in that heartbeat was a fear of speaking up. And in every single meeting, one of the things that we try to do is that we have a values moment. In some meetings, we have a community moment. In some meetings, we have what we call a behavior moment that allows different employees. So it can be the shop floor, it can be the cleaning lady in a meeting who presents the safety moment or presents the culture moment. And the idea is that we need to be learning from each other, regardless of your station, whether you are the CEO or whatever it is. I mean, we have junior clerks presenting, for instance, at the Transformation Mandating Committee, which is full of, as you can imagine, directors. The CEO is the chair of it. So you can imagine now having somebody who's a junior administrative clerk being asked to come and present a culture moment. So they need to do the research and look at the values and say, how does this relate? And what is it that I can teach my fellow employees about how we engage with each other? So for me, those are some of the ways that we use to keep our employees engaged and to keep them as part of our evolving journey.
Got you. So important. Psychological safety, purpose, culture, everyone speaking to it. Your thoughts on this one, Kathy, and primarily, I guess, emphasizing how it is that we can make this sustainable, and not only to businesses, but even to NPOs that you also engage with.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is relevant to all types of organizations, companies, non-profits, and I think Charles provided great examples here that there needs to be multiple levels of engagement or opportunities. And I think often companies, it's important to provide that space where you do a survey where there may need to be anonymity so that you can get that honest heartbeat feedback. But that needs to be coupled then with the individual sessions that people have, as well as what you were saying about meetings. I mean, I guess to draw this a little bit back to volunteering, we would also recommend that companies in developing or revising their volunteering strategies do the same thing, that they engage employees through surveys, through conversations to find out the preferences and needs of employees and what works for them and how to link whatever volunteering strategy they're going to come up with to the business, to its culture, to its core values.
Perfect. And I think that's so important. So you're going to add, because it goes beyond just saying, this is our project, this is the funding we're looking for. We're making sure that our values are aligned. And as a result, that builds up the level of engagement.
I mean, to the point that Kathy just made around employee volunteering. So, for instance, one of the things that we've done as part of our evolving journey was that we went back to employees. And we have been, over the last couple of months, working with the Charities Aid Foundation to ask them, what is it that you need in a revitalized Sasol for Good, which is our employee volunteering program? So we want them to own it. It is their program. It's how they contribute to their communities, to our fence line communities. But we've actually said, what is it that you need? What do you want us to do? And we're taking those lessons, and in the next couple of months, hopefully we'll be relaunching the new exciting how you show up Cecil for Good program.
A lesson in active listening again, right? What is it that you need? And being cognizant and aware of the response here that we heard from one of our earlier panelists. Rohan, I'd like to come to you as well. Before we do come to the audience for questions and answers, we do have some time, and we're happy for you to raise your hands here in the audience, and the microphone will make its way to you, and we'll also address some questions that have come through on the platform as well. And Rohan, I guess a key theme that we're looking at as well is resources and tools, right? As you mentioned, you study these institutions, you've witnessed particular changes unfolding in an environment like India, where both the public and the private sector have come on board. But ultimately, you need tools, resources, in order to enable a greater drive of employee engagement. Share a few suggestions with us in terms of the tools and resources that we can implement within our NPOs, within our businesses, in order to ensure that we drive up engagement here.
Right. Okay. So the tools and resources, I think it's largely, there are a lot of uh, employee engagement softwares available. I mean, that's largely in the domain of HR. And since I am more of an academic and policy person, but I can, for your audience, let you know some of them, some of these tools that are widely prevalent. And I will then probably just give you a case study of how one particular corporate has used a particular tool to make their employee engagement program much more effective. So I'll just list them. Maybe friends can check it out. One is called Reflective with a K. One is called Culture AMP, AMP. Then there's Tiny Pulse. There's Office Vibe. There's Blink. There's Energage. There's Fond, FOND. There's Peakon, PEAKON. There is Motivosity, and there is Qualtrics. So these are some of the these, because it's becoming quite popular. So a lot of
Quick one on
these
these,
employee
though,
engagement
Rohan.
tools
Are they for free? Because we are speaking to an audience of NPOs here.
That you'll have to check out with the HR. I'll probably, in fact, this is not really my domain, because this is, like I said, largely an HR domain. But I'll tell you a little bit about one of the softwares that I was evaluating. So this company called NetApp, which is based in the US and largely in data management and solutions. We were working with them for their India chapter, and they use a tool called the Benevity tool, Benevity. And they had a very, very robust kind of employee engagement program called Volunteer Time Off, which was in India since 2011. But in 2016, they basically wanted to use technology to manage this program better. So what is this program? Like I said, it's best for the HR to speak on this. But before I end, I'd actually like to speak a little bit about purpose, because that's something I really is so close to my heart.
For sure, go ahead.
Hoping, Gugu, that you'd ask a question on purpose. But quickly to tell you, what is this Benevity tool? It's a tool like a virtual platform that basically brings together charities and volunteers on a Facebook-like forum for community service activities. And then what the employee can do is use this tool to get access to about 500 different volunteering projects across charities and causes. He or she can pick whichever project appeals to them and register for that specific event. Once you do that, the employee's calendar automatically gets blocked. And the best thing I think about the Benefit tool is that it immediately links them to logistic support for the volunteering event, like transport, meal requirement, all of that. And this, by adopting this Benefit tool as a case study, NetApp India, reported that there has been an increase in the uptake of employee participation rate from 20% before 2015 to 38% last year. Right. So this has really been it has been a very good tool. But if I may, Gugu, quickly come in on purpose.
Go ahead, Rohan.
I love. Yeah, thank you so much. I think when we talk of purpose, because we use purpose is like a fad today. We're always talking about purpose. But the central question, which I'm sure all leaders are constantly navigating, is can we make a balance between profitability and purpose? I do it every single day at work, right? And for me, there is no simple answer to this, because for me, how I see, and I just want to quickly take you through how the role of business in society has changed, because that is what the conference is about. And I actually teach this. In 1968, there's this gentleman called Albert Carr, CARR. He basically largely has worked on business ethics, and he was asked, "What do you think is the role of business in society?" And he said the role of business in society is only one: profit maximization, profit maximization, profit maximization. And even if you maximize that profit at the cost of being unethical, that's fine.
Whoa.
Now, this entire conceptualization with respect to the purpose of business underwent not a paradigm shift, but a major shift in 1970 when your Nobel laureate in economics, Milton Friedman, which I'm sure all of you know about, gave one simple definition of what is the role of business. He said, the business of business is business. In other words, he was very, very clear that purpose of business is profitability. But one important thing he disagreed with Albert Carr, saying, if a business is unethical, it is not a business. So I think that's where this whole component of ethics being important comes in 1970 with Milton Friedman. In 1984, there is this paradigm shift in the role of business in society with Edward Freeman, which I'm sure all of you today, we use the word stakeholder very loosely, but he was the one who came up with the stakeholder theory. That's where I think purpose gets foregrounded, and we start talking of purpose beyond profitability. So I think it's important to understand how over the decades there has been a shift in the role of business in society. And in the last session, I think there was a very interesting talk which I highly enjoyed. And for some of you who are interested, Joel Bakan, who's a Canadian professor of law, has come up with this new book called The New Corporation, and he talks about why good corporations are bad for democracy right now. So, I mean, I can go on about this, but happy to take this.
What I like about it is that you've gone back into to being a key educator. I can see there, Rohan, in giving us context and background to fully understand and comprehend where many of these themes do come from. But you mentioned something so important regarding those various comments, right? Is that we're looking for ethical business operations. Business needs to keep in mind that it needs to do business, but at the same time find areas of cohesiveness in order to unpack and impact its communities that they happen to be involved in. And I guess this takes us to the question then that speaks to overall employee engagement, both for the NPO, both for the organization as well, corporates that are looking to participate and sponsor. And Kathy, perhaps I can come to you to give us some feedback just in our closing remarks as to what it is that we need to be cognizant of in terms of building employee engagement, building and encouraging areas of alignment, speaking to purpose, and of course, the fundamentals that we're looking to attain as we look to close off our panel. We are open to taking one or two questions on the floor, should they still be present, but if you'd perhaps indulge us in sharing some of your thoughts there.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Gugu. I'm going to focus on the volunteering aspect of that again, and I think I've spoken a little bit to the corporate strategy side of that. There's obviously a lot of strategic choices that need to be made, but we would advise involving employees in that, and importantly, involving your non-profit partners in that conversation. And also recognizing from a company side that employee volunteering actually costs non-profits money. So although you want volunteering to be mutually beneficial, and there is a cost to the nonprofit in terms of time, setting it up, managing volunteering, tracking it, providing you with the reporting you need, etc. But if I switch over to the nonprofit side, I would recommend for nonprofits to, with all of their partners, and we've spoken a lot about developing open and more transparent and trust partners, but co-creating a kind of menu of volunteering opportunities. And volunteering doesn't have to be, the physical events. So yes, you want to include one or two of those physical events that people normally associate with volunteering, but also think about what specific skills you can leverage from that partner. Are there professional skills that they can provide you on a pro bono basis? Are there goods and services that they can provide you? Part of employee engagement and volunteering strategies also includes give as you earn, match funding. It also includes fundraising drives as well as goods drives. So the more you can co-create these with your partners and have a menu of opportunities for them, from big events through to very ongoing, longer professional support, I think the better for both of you. Yeah, that would be my closing comment.
Very critical. Double checking if there is a question in the room by any chance, if then maybe we might be able to squeeze it in. Any hands so far? One just shot up right at the back. We'll take that question as a final question. If you could please speak as to who you are sharing your question with, ma'am, or directing your question to.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know, it's not really much of a question as it is a comment. Firstly, Ruan, love your passion. It resonates so much with me. Mashadi from For Good, and we provide an employee volunteering software for corporates in SA. And
Is it free?
you mentioned purpose alongside profit. Sorry about that. Purpose alongside profit, and I think we've also identified 4 key pillars to successful employee engagement programs that we implement and work with corporates. And the first one is, incentives, having incentives that actually want to make them take part. And these are not like obviously giving them take a lot vouchers, but it's, what Kathy mentioned, the matched donations. Saying, I'm going to donate to this organization. How's my company supporting that? And in most instances, you can match it as a corporate, and this is like a leave day. The permission to play and actually allowing your employees to go out and engage. Another one is recognition. This is where, how do you actually thank your employees? By saying that, we recognize the great work that you're doing, keep it up. That automatically motivates them to bring their friends and colleagues from the business to the next engagement or, to do more volunteering. And then building the experiences. And this goes alongside with the NPOs. So I love what you were saying about how, it's about that purpose, So with that, it's getting employees to also have a say in terms of what NGOs we're supporting as a corporate, have a say and say, listen, I'm working with this NGO, how about we build or run this project with them? And then building experiences that are beneficial for the employees as well as the NPOs. So it's not just about, we've got a great volunteering structure, but how is the NPO actually benefiting from this? A lot of great ones that I've seen in the time that I've been in the spaces, and I think Brian was in the room, I saw him, but, like having like a big, Rise Against Hunger event, which is a packing event, where you have the NGO there speaking about what it is that they're doing with corporates, so they get to learn about your NPO, and in the same time, they're making an impact and giving back. We've done like online reading sessions, so I loved what Kathy was saying about the fact that they don't have to be physical. So work with the organizations where they are, but also meet the employees and how they can volunteer. So surveys are equally as important to find out, to say, listen, I can't physically be at an organization, but I can help out online. So how do we build experiences around that? So yeah, and then the last one is just communication. Make sure that you've got all of these amazing tactics as a corporate, but speak about them, in your canteens, in flyers, desktop, and not just on email. Yeah, but so love the topic, and yeah, thanks for the speakers and the insights.
Thank you, Mashadi. I think you've just given us our closing remarks. So thank you for that, and we've definitely noted them. Very succinct, very insightful, and I guess just ticking off that list, it's much of the examples that you've shared with us as well.
Much of the examples, yes.
Exactly.
A lot of what she said, a lot of it we've done.
Precisely.
We've done Rise for Hunger. We have employees choosing which organizations they get involved in, register them, and let the company match what they're giving.
Got you.
So a lot of what she said is there.
Very true. Rowan, it's so difficult to ignore your hand because you're on a big screen and everyone's going to call me out for not giving you a chance to talk. So I'll give you 30 seconds or a minute to wrap it up for us if you can.
Gugu, thank you very much. Quickly, since we have such passionate friends from the nonprofit sector in this room, I think it's my duty to let them know. For all of those who are struggling with how do I balance purpose and profitability, please go and check out the Grameen Danone model that Professor Muhammad Yunus has started in Bangladesh. It's a fantastic case study of, and I think this is the model that the world is moving towards, because typically you had the development sector world into for-profit, non-profit. For-profit is always the giver, non-profit is always the receiver. Here you have this hybrid model of a social business, which today a lot of people are calling social purpose organizations. Mm-hmm. And please look at this, and I'm sure in Africa this will be a super hit, right? So that's one. The second is we spoke about co-creation. I think that's so very important, right? And for that, also we need to change our methodologies. Our methodologies in doing development work, be it as a CSR, be it as an employee engagement program, needs to have more participatory and bottom-up approaches. My work has largely been on that. Surveys, therefore, have a very limited, at the end of the day, when you're talking about nuances, when you're talking about women who've been battered by their husbands, a survey doesn't work. You therefore need to move into more qualitative research approaches. Also, I think the focus on learning is very, very key. So even in employee engagement programs, often there are no monetary rewards, but an important thing is what is that person learning from that. I think that is where HR managers cannot only be the custodians of an employee engagement program. It has to be done by different leaders, right? Again, like I said, this is a subject which is so close to my heart. I look forward to speaking on this separately with all of you. But please be in touch, and thank you very much to everybody from South Africa for allowing this opportunity. Look forward to being in touch, and thank you very much. And apologies for going beyond time, the second time over with Trialogue.
No worries at all. Thank you so much to both Rowan, Kathy, and Khawapalelwa giving us some insight, and of course, Mashodi also sharing some of her thoughts with us in her comments and closing remarks there. I think lots of insight for us to really go home with and deliberate on, and make sure that we provide those kind of environments that offer the safety net. We understand the traumas that everyone has gone through, looking at the organization's perspectives and background, increase and enhance engagement, which is a key takeaway, and that in itself can only be driven by fully comprehending and understanding purpose and ensuring that that is aligned between all particular stakeholders. It's been a blast having this panel discussion. Thank you so much. I do want us just to acknowledge that we will be taking a quick tea break. Yet again, we are running over ever so slightly. However, we'll limit the tea break to 10 minutes.
15.
15. We'll give you 15 minutes. Quick refresh. We would like to commence with the program promptly at 11:45. So could you do us the favor of being back in the room at least by 11:40? That would be appreciated to make sure that we can quickly pick up on the feedback. Again, please continue tweeting your feedback and insights. There is a prize for you to win, which is the listing, NPO listing in the Trialogue hub. So please make sure that you actively participate, and we'll share the announcement of some of those winners in a